Good afternoon. My name is Joel. In this presentation, I'll be talking about my GRC analysis on Intel Corporation based on their final year report in 2025 and the external sources that I have found. So moving on to the next slide, I'll be talking about governance, risk, and compliance, followed by a comparison of Intel's own disclosure against the outside sources that I have found, and my overall assessment. A few figure to keep in mind here is that Intel have halved its management layers, took an 8.9 billion investment from the US government, generated most of their revenues outside US, and is defending a $1 billion lawsuit now. So starting with governance, Intel have appointed a new CEO in March 2025 after the board removed the previous one. The board has maintained a close oversight of two areas in particular: cybersecurity, where they review twice annually, and climate risk. One limitation worth noticing here is that the report says little about the board composition itself, which makes it harder to assess. So, looking at this slide now, looking at the line graph, you can see that the stock of Intel has declined sharply and went bottom in 2024 and then recovered in 2025. The board here acted decisively, whereby they cut the management layers and roughly a fifth to a quarter of staff. Moving on to risk, I have grouped Intel's exposure to five categories: competitive pressure, particularly in AI chips, execution risk in building out its foundry business, geopolitical and trade exposure, even how much revenue comes from abroad. A new risk tied to the government's ownership stake, and lastly, an ongoing legal dispute over patents and antitrust matters. So Intel is addressing this risk on several fronts, such as diversifying its business, raising capital from government, Nvidia and SoftBank cutting their costs, conducting regular security audits, and contesting its legal cases, which has already been reduced uh, to by nearly half. However, meaningful risk still remains, as Intel acknowledged its new manufacturing business may not succeed. For compliance, Intel have performed well on fundamentals as independent audited financials and disciplined management of trade sections. The new government investments, however, introduce an obligation that are largely untested. My recommendation here is that Intel should establish a dedicated framework to track and manage these new government-related requirements. Moving on to synthesis, a company's report should not be taken at a face value, so I cross-checked it against outside reporting. And the government investment wasn't purely a commercial decision. Reporting indicated it followed by a political pressure on the CEO to resign. And the deal was finalized in roughly 3 weeks. That context was absent from Intel's own report. So the external sources don't contradict with the Intel's account. They just simply provide a full context over here. So my overall conclusion here is that Intel navigated a difficult year reasonably well. It's strongest in area where it has established practices such as cybersecurity oversight. It's weaker on investor communications, given the pending litigations, and is entering a generally new territory now that the government holds a stake. In short, solid fundamentals, but still adapting to an unusual situation. My recommendation here is to strengthen the investor communication and build a formal system for tracking the new government obligations. Thank you and have a nice day.